Hey there, you're listening to the Girls Talking Life podcast, and I'm your host, Johanna. If you're like me, you love time with friends. I always leave feeling encouraged, inspired to try something different, or I've learned something new. So why not continue to grow even when we can't be with our girlfriends? We're not made to do life on our own. So in each episode of this show, I'll bring you a girl and her story to give you refreshing ideas to stir your soul. Let's walk this road together. Are you ready to talk life? Hi there, you are listening to week 5 of the Summer of Friendship series. Last week, Jill talked about feeling too fragile for friendship. If you are in a fragile season, I hope her words spoke to your heart. And after listening, you were able to let someone in and ask them to walk through it with you, or at the very least, you were able to begin to think about that possibility. If you missed that episode from my special guest host, be sure to go back for it. Today, we're chatting about our capacity for friendships, what it might look like to have or to be an introverted friend, and thinking through our expectations for ourselves and for those friends. Okay, I have a confession to make. I am an introvert. That's right, I talk about friendship and I'm also introverted. But let me assure you, I love people, I love my friends, and I know what a blessing those meaningful relationships in my life are, and I crave connection. But social situations also drain my energy, and I process most things in my head instead of talking through them. Unlike my extroverted sisters, who get energized by people and activity and are more likely to process their thoughts verbally. Every time I spend meaningful time with friends, I always come away feeling filled up. I might be really tired, but I am refreshed at the same time. No matter whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, the truth is we all have a finite amount of time and energy. This amount is just going to vary from person to person, depending on your personality and also your season of life. So check in with yourself and notice your capacity. You don't want to overextend too much. And on the other hand, you do have to push yourself sometimes. We talked earlier in this series about God calling us to be in relationship. Paul talks a lot in the New Testament about being together to be mutually encouraged, building each other up, spurring each other on, refreshing one another. A lot of times, walking in obedience to the Lord is going to stretch us. So, if you happen to be an introvert like me, how do you balance this? I think you pray for guidance. Try to discern what God has for you. And if His Spirit is nudging you toward rest, then rest. My pastor said in his sermon yesterday, because God reigns, we can rest. But if you're feeling a tug, a nudge, a burning in your heart to foster a relationship, then go. He will give you what you need. He will equip you and sustain you. He promises to do that. Let's talk a little bit more about capacity. Dr. Robin Dunbar, a British anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist, discovered through his research that there is a cognitive limit to the number of individuals with whom any one person can maintain a stable relationship. In other words, there's a maximum number of people that you have the brain space to actually know. His theory is called Dunbar's number. That number, according to him, is 150. He proposes that as the rough number of people you can know casually. Think about your extended family, your neighbors, your coworkers, people at church. Think about how many people whose names you know and who you have at least retained some information about. From there, the circles of friends get smaller and smaller. If you picture a dartboard, that outer layer is your 150, roughly, and then each layer in will be smaller, and you'll have more emotional closeness with them. The same with the next layer, and then the next, until you're left with your inner circle. This number is right around 5, give or take, and they are your closest, most trusted people. These are the people you spend the most time with. They might be your husband, your sister, your best friend, even your kids. People can move around from level to level of friendship in different seasons, but what's important to note is that we all have a finite capacity for social interaction. Even you extroverts out there. So if you're spending all of your capacity in your inner circle, you won't have as much time and energy for the outer layers, and so on. In an article in the New Yorker, Maria Konnikova says that the time we invest in superficial relationships comes at the expense of more profound ones. She's specifically talking about spending time connecting online rather than in person, but I think it's true of all our relationships. To further drive the point home, Robin Dunbar says, if you garner connections with more people, you end up distributing your fixed amount of social capita more thinly. So the average capita per person is lower. So with all of that in mind, let's talk about expectations. The ones you put on yourself and the ones you might set for your friends. I'm not sure if this is true of all women, but I have pretty high expectations for friendship and just about everything in my life. If you're single with no children, you might have the capacity for 5 really close girlfriends. Same if you're an empty nester. If you're married and if you have children living at home, they are likely taking up spots in your inner circle, so your ability to have a handful of super close friends just might not be possible. 1 or 2, yes, but not many. I have 2 girls. One is a preteen and one is a teenager, and they take up a lot of my emotional energy right now. Thinking through these things for yourself and with your friends in mind will help you set more realistic expectations. If you've been hard on yourself for not having enough time for friends, or for when your friends aren't making time for you. Remember, their capacities will vary, but they are still limited, just like you, to a finite amount of time and energy. I have a good friend who I spent a lot of time with while she was a stay-at-home mom, and then she went back to school and she started a new job and her kids got bigger and had more activities, and she just didn't have the same capacity for our friendship. At first, I took it personally and it hurt me, but then I realized it wasn't personal. Her capacity had just changed. So how do you honor your capacity and your friendships? For my fellow introvert, if you are friends with an extrovert, she might invite you out a lot or want to do things in bigger groups. She might want to verbally process lots of things with you. Say yes when you can, but be mindful of your capacity. If you need to decline, it's okay, but don't just say no. Do it with an offer of a future date you could get together, or say something like, I can't tonight, but I really do want to see you. Or I can't go to that big thing with lots of people, but I would love to have you over next week. That will help our extroverted friends know to keep trying. Something else you could do is try a compromise and set some expectations that, yes, I will go out in that big group with you once a month, but that is all my capacity will allow. And then also be sure to invite your extroverted friend to coffee, just the 2 of you. For my extroverted friends, don't give up on your introverted friend. Her capacity is just different than yours. Her declining your invitation doesn't mean she doesn't want to spend time with you. Look for signs that she really does want to engage. Try an invitation of a quiet night or a smaller group. If you do invite your introvert friend to a bigger gathering and she says yes, something you can do is give her a job. Ask her to take everyone's coats or make sure everyone gets set with a drink. This can take the pressure off to engage in small talk, something introverts don't typically like to do, and instead it gives them a purpose and a place at your gathering. Lastly, invite your introverted friend to something in advance. That way, she can plan and save up her energy for it, and even plan a few days of rest after if she needs to. If you'd like to hear more about the introvert-extrovert dynamic in friendship, you can listen to my conversation with Jill E. McCormick, our guest host for this series, on her podcast, Grace in Real Life. On episode 134, How to Make Friends as an Introvert. I will link to that episode in the show notes. All right, that's it for today. I hope this has given you a place to start considering your capacity and the expectations you might have for yourself or the women in your life. Next week, we'll talk about time, authenticity, and deepening your existing friendships. Until then, remember, whether introvert or extrovert, you have a finite capacity for social interaction, and it does matter where you spend that time and energy. Don't be hard on yourself if your friendships aren't where you want them to be, especially if you're in a demanding season. Invite God into the process and ask Him when you should rest and when you should work to foster the relationship.